Hello everyone, welcome back to Emoji Economics YouTube channel. My name is Oluwale Godwin. Today we'll be introducing ourselves to another course, so History of Economic Thoughts. And in this particular class, we'll be talking about the introductory aspect. So that's why you have introduction. So presented by me, and that's my picture over there. So I'm just trying to leave a little piece of myself, like my pictures and some of my works to kind of take inventory of my own development with time. All right, so you are likely going to be in your third year. So I don't know, it depends on your university, but you are likely going to be in your third year by the time you are being introduced to history of economic thoughts based on your curriculum or whatever. And if you are the type that it's been introduced to the history of economic thoughts as an economics undergraduate from your very first semester, then good for you. All right, but this course has been prepared for students that are likely in their third year, and it is containing, or it is to contain everything that you'll be needing as a penultimate student, as a penultimate economic student of a given university. So, what is the definition of HET? So, we'll be using the acronym uh, HET denoting history of economic thought. So, HET is the historical description of how economic ideas originated and developed through the contributions of various economic thinkers across the globe down the corridor of time. So it's just talking about the economic ideas of people, through time, and as it has been influenced by by their circumstances. By the time you go through this course, you'd see how the economic ideas of people uh, were shaped by what was happening around them. Okay, talking about events around them at that particular period of time. So HET is basically the historical account. So you are telling a story, historical account of how these ideas developed, and from who did they develop, why did they develop, you know, and so on and so forth. So going over the definition again, we have HET is the historical description of how economic ideas originated and developed through the contributions of various economic thinkers across the globe down the corridor of time. So HET is more or less like it's a global thing. So because by the time we start going through, you see, we'll be talking about different countries, different civilizations, people from different places. We won't be able to talk about everybody, obviously, but to be able to like look at one or two major, you know, thinkers. Okay, we call them economic thinkers. So um, that contributed to the development of economics, as a discipline at the end of the day. All right, so let's just move on. The study of HET exposes students, readers to the contributions of major economic thinkers, their approaches. We are still going to talk about approaches, different approaches to studying HET, the events that characterize their contributions, and the strength and shortcomings of the ideas. I don't want to dwell too much on this, so let's just move on. Now, what are other definitions of HET? According to Prof. Bell, HET is defined as the study of the heritage left by the writers of economic subjects. Right. So when you say something is an heritage, something is heritage or a heritage. Okay. So we are talking about something precious, that was left behind by somebody, for someone else to inherit, or something like that. So Prof. Bell defined HET as the study of precious things, right? Precious ideas left by the writers of economic subjects. So most of because of the scope of the course that we'll be talking about, we'll be looking at time period up to the 1930s before the Great Depression, right? And most of the contributors are dead, so that's just that's the point I'm basically trying to make. So AGT is the study of the heritage left by these people for people like us to study. Now, Prof. Harvey defined AGT as a critical account of the development of economic ideas, searching into their origin. I was saying it the other time that how did these ideas develop? What were the circumstances? What were the events surrounding those who developed these ideas? Right, so he spoke about searching into their origin, looking at the interrelations and their manifestations. So how did a particular economic idea relate with another economic idea, which and in this case we'll be talking about two or more people, right? So and you'll be able to kind of see relationship between the idea of somebody somewhere else in after like having um, a gap in time, maybe 10, 20, 30, 50 years, and then you see that okay, there's a relationship between their ideas, and it's not as if they've met before, or something like that. And then look at the manifestations of these ideas, manifestation in terms of policy. So how did these ideas shape the economic policy of that time period of whatever country has been concerned, or whatever country that's been written or spoken about. Now, Prof. Schipenter defined HET as the sum of all the opinions and desires concerning economic subjects, especially concerning public policies of different times and places. So when you look at these three definitions, they are basically talking about the same thing. They're just looking at the origination of economic ideas, the proponents or the contributors of economic ideas, the events surrounding the ideas, the interrelationship of these ideas, looking at what different people are saying, and then the manifestation of these ideas in shaping public policies, public economic policies, at a given time period, of a particular place. So that's just it. I'm not asking you to memorize all of these things. So these definitions have been provided for each just have a good grasp of what HET is all about. So if you're asked to define HET, well, I think the most important thing is for you to write what you understand. So, and you may maybe add one or two of what these people have said, but it's more or less just write what you understand. For me, just write what you understand. So that's that about that economic history. So you just have to be careful, right? You just have to be careful so that you don't mix things up. Of especially, I think Jean-Baptiste Colbert and Philip von Oneck, who happen to be like the major proponents of the mercantilist era. I think there are some interesting things because some of their policies really worked, right? So we'll get there, right? So after that, we have physiocracy, the era of the first systematic school of thought, which includes the ideas of Francois Quesnay and Vincent de Gournay. I think that was the era where they started to talk about GDP, like national income accounting. Okay, not the way it is now. Okay, this is 2023, so not the way it is now, or the way it's gonna be by the time by the year, whatever year in the future that you'll be watching this video. So no, but there was a way it was developed during that era, and it was the first time that someone was going to be looking at the macroeconomic nature, of economic activities, in a given country. So Quesnay was trying to prove a point, with the national economic accounting that it did. So that will also get to that, not to bore you. After that, we move into the classical economics era, and I think you must be very familiar with names like Adam Smith, David Ricardo, John Stuart Mill, Thomas Malthus, Jean-Baptiste Say, right? If you don't know anybody, you probably know Adam Smith, this invisible hand guy, invisible hand, yeah, that was the era that he proposed it, that he talked about the invisible hand. Not that it had not been existing, but he kind of popularized the idea of the invisible hand. I kind of gave him, I think he gave it that name, invisible hand, and then you have David Ricardo talking about comparative advantage. Just Stuart Mill made his own contributions. Then Thomas Malthus talking about population. I think you remember that then, secondary school, and you've probably come across that idea again now. Okay, I mean before now rather, that population outgrows economic output, right? So all of those things. So why did he say that? So what were the events surrounding him that time that made him to say that? And if you look at what he said then, I don't know, it depends on how much of it you remember. He gave a hopeless nature of civilization. So it was like everything was going to crumble at the end of the day because population would eventually outgrow means of subsistence, will outgrow food, right? And food was what he considered to be the only source of wealth too. So it will outgrow food. Then famine is going to come in, epidemics will come in that will wipe off the excess population, and people are going to suffer this one and that. So that was the era that he said those things. So we'll keep I've arranged them chronologically anyway. So from ancient economic thought to mercantilism to physiocracy, classical economy. So we'll be looking at, for most of what we'll be doing, we'll be looking at the contribution of each of these people, right? Each of these people, like their major contributions. There were a lot of things that some of these people said that are not going to be talked about in this course because they are not so relevant. But there are some of them that, even though they are not so relevant, they brought about debates. You know, they brought about a lot of debates, you know, during their time, and you know, it's just kind of nice to just look at these debates, because it kind of helps shape how we are going to be thinking, how we are going to debate economic ideas, to know which one is going to stand, which one is appropriate, you know, and this and that. All right. Then you have Jean-Baptiste Say, that was talking about Say's law, that supply will create its own demand. So it doesn't matter, anything you produce would eventually attract its own buyers. So is it true? Is it not true? Why did he say those things? You know, and all of that. So after that school of thoughts, or after that era, so let me call it school of thought. After that era, then we have the Marxian economy. So of course, when you see something like this, what comes to your head? Karl Marx. Yeah, bro, you're right. Karl Marx. So that was the era that was characterized by the economic ideas of Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. Okay, so Karl Marx was like the biggest contributor. Frederick Engels was more of, maybe Engels or Engels now, one of it. Okay, was more of a financier. So financier, like he was more of the guy financing all the publications of Karl Marx, you know, during that time. I don't think I'm going to talk about those things. Enter into Marxian economics, maybe topic 6 or whatever like that. So, and if you remember Karl Marx, you probably remember his fight against capitalism. So this guy he doesn't want capitalism. He didn't want capitalism. So capitalism was like mean, was inhumane to him because of the way he treated workers, and that was why I said the bourgeois, okay, are going to be attacked eventually by the proletariat, okay, or by the proletariats. You know, the poor class are eventually going to attack the rich, the wealthy class. Okay, so the wealthy class being the bourgeois, so, or the bourgeoisie, whatever spelling, just get the spelling right, but I think the right pronunciation is the bourgeois. Okay, so that's these wealthy capitalists, who are few in number, would eventually be overthrown by the masses, okay, of laborers that they are exploiting. Okay, then you know, you begin to learn about surplus value. So why did Karl Marx talk about surplus value? What does surplus value mean? And so on and so forth. So all these things I'm saying, just attend this class, just enjoy this video, enjoy yourself. It's introductory, right? So when we begin to touch each and every of these schools, you'll be able to say more than I'm even saying in this introductory class, if you were to prepare one, you know, by yourself for people. Then the last one we'll be looking at for this particular course will be the marginalization revolution and the neoclassical economics. So this was where marginal concepts were introduced into economics. So you have marginal utility specifically, okay, utility, the concept of marginal utility, marginal revenue, marginal product, and all of those things. So that was the marginalization revolution. It's a marginalization I was meant to write now, marginalism or whatever. So I think if it's wrong here, we're going to correct it by the time we get into this topic on its own. But it's just the era of margin. So that's like have it as revolution. Right, so margin, the concept of marginal started to come into economics, you know, because right from the physiocrat era, there's something called the labor theory of value. So that was saying that the cost of something is entirely determined by the number of labor hours that was put into it. So let's say we have a phone, okay, now let me use a phone. Okay, the example that was used was the example of a hunter who was to kill a deer and one other animal. So I don't remember what the animal is right now, but let me say a deer and a lion. All right, so if it takes 20 hours to kill a deer, if it takes a hunter 20 hours to kill a deer and it takes the hunter 10 hours to kill a lion, so it means that one deer must sell for 2 lions. If you take 20 hours, that is, it takes more time to hunt a deer, right? It takes twice as much time to hunt a deer as what's required to hunt a lion. So that means, based on the labor hours now, based on the entirety of the based on the labor hours, that means one deer should exchange for 2 lions. So that's like the basic concept of the labor theory of value. And then it was picked up by the classical economists then, which was redefined somewhat, and then Karl Marx picked it up as well. He added something nice to it because it has shortcomings from what the classical economists were saying, and Karl Marx improved on the shortcomings, but he still essentially believed in the labor theory of value. Then during the marginalization revolution, the labor theory of value was now kind of debunked, not debunked, right? So because it was more or less focusing on the supply side, so it's saying that the cost of production is the significant factor determining the price of a commodity, right? So it was during the marginalization revolution that no, it's not like that. It's not just like that. The demand of the product also plays a big role. And what determines the demand of the product? It's marginal utility. So the more the marginal utility that people derive from a product, the higher the price will likely command, right? So this was the era where William Stanley Jevons, his work, including the work of Carl Menger, Leon Warras, spoke about the demand side, adding the demand side to the supply model. So you have demand and supply coming together to determine the price of a product. So like I said, or like I've been saying, by the time we get to that point, by the time we get to that bridge, we're also going to cross it. Then Francis Edgeworth. So if you're taking public sector economic courses, you'll probably be introduced to Edgeworth box. So he spoke about Edgeworth box. And Alfred Marshall. What Alfred Marshall did, he more or less like reorganized some of the ideas of the people that came before him, and then he did a lot of mathematics like this. If you don't like the mathematics you have in economics, I think Alfred Marshall is the person that you should shoot. Okay, just take a gun and shoot him. But wasn't that of a bad guy, because what he did was he introduced a lot of mathematics into economics, but in his writings he still communicated in a way that laymen were going to understand him, and then he left the mathematics in the footnotes of whatever publications he was making that time. So he left the mathematics for those who could understand the mathematics, while still passing this basic message across, which he developed from the conclusions of his mathematical models and all of that. So that's one of the first guys that you may have to shoot if you don't like the complexity of mathematics that you have, the level of complexity of mathematics that you have in economics, and it's just the beginning. So these other three era of the Keynesian economics, which was characterized by the economic ideas of John Maynard Keynes, as influenced by the 1930s Great Depression. So because that's just like the most significant contributor of this school of economics in this particular era, right? So, and that's why you have it as Keynesian economics. So he said a lot of things. He debunked ideas of classical economists. So one of the because they believed in invisible hand, talking about markets. Market should be left alone. Government shouldn't intervene in the affairs of the market. Market was self-regulating, because the prices are flexible. Whatever makes the price to go up in the long run, the price is going to return. So it's equilibrium level, and the markets were going to clear. And so Keynes came, and when he saw things that happened during some of the things that happened during the Great Depression, price increased and they didn't come down, they didn't come back, they didn't maintain equilibrium. So he brought about the concept of sticky prices, sticky wages. If you've done those things in macroeconomics, or you've been introduced to them macroeconomics, so this was a guy that brought all of those things together at the very beginning. So that's what I mean. Other people have improved on it since this time, but he did a lot of significant work regarding that era. Then he also advocated for massive government intervention, government spending. So it was the one that was saying that during the recession, to get an economy out of a recession, the government should do a lot of spending. So the government pursue expansionary fiscal policies. So you learn more of that. When we talk about Keynesian economics, but it's not going to be in this course, right? Because that's going to be among um, the that's going to be in history of economic thought for ultimate students, ultimate economic students. I mean, 400 level students in year 4, right? So that's going to be part of what they'll be doing. Then monetarism and the neoclassical school. Now, the neoclassical school, they worked on the things that Keynes criticized them on, right? And then they came back to refurbish, their ideas, taking note of what Keynes said, and so on and so forth. Then we have the proponents were Robert Lucas, Milton Friedman, Thomas John Sargent, and etc. Right, so they have modern development and heterodox approaches, which is going to continue to evolve. So the ones that we have now, we have behavioral economics, post-Keynesian economics, then era of now we have experimental economics, and whatever it is that's going to come up after this particular period. So you just have them under modern development and heterodox, approaches. So I think there's also one that is Keynesian classical synthesis. I don't know what that is called, but maybe New Keynesian school or something like that. So all of those schools are the ones after 1930. All right. So like I said, the scope of this particular course is whatever has been happening up until 1930. So like we are not talking about the Great Depression. It's like before the Great Depression. So, and when we are looking at history of economic thoughts in another, like in another course, which will be the conclusion of this particular course. So we're looking at all of these other ones: the Keynesian economics, monetarism, and neoclassical school, and this modern whatever like that. Right, so but what we are going to discuss in this course is enough for what you are going to do in year 3. So approaches to studying HET, time is already going. I have chronological approach, is just talking about the historical accounts of economic ideas in the order of time, which is the approach that we are using in this particular course. How did these things evolve with time? So the historical accounts of economic ideas in the order of time. Then you also have conceptual ideological approach, which is talking about the historical accounts of economic ideas stemming from the evolution of concepts and their interrelationship. So this one is more or less like, let's say, the labor theory of value, for example. So if you were to use ideological approach, you talk about labor theory of value at once. So what did the classical school say about labor theory of value? What did Karl Marx say about labor theory of value? And what did the marginalist revolution talk about labor theory of value? So they also like group everything together and talk about labor theory of value at once, like that. So that's like an example that I can think of. Then you have philosophical approach, is talking about the accounts of economic ideas from the lens of ethics and fairness. So you look at some of the things that this guy said, Plato, Aristotle. They were talking about just price. So you're not cheating your neighbor, not cheating your buyer, not using false measure, just price, a fair price. Okay, don't say because somebody's in a deep problem. No, when someone is in a deep problem, that is when the demand for whatever they want is inelastic. So don't say because of that you should raise your price. And basic economics teaches us that if you are a seller, okay, when the demand of your product is inelastic, it is better for you to set higher prices. Okay, but they were saying that you shouldn't do that. You should be fair. So they were, if you want to look at the history of economics from the perspective of fairness, that means you are using the philosophical approach. Then there are other approaches: inductive approach, deductive, welfare, institutional approach, neoclassical approach, Keynesian approach, and whatever approach that may be existing by the time you be studying this course. All right. So there's a hint in case you need a mnemonic for you to, memorize these approaches. So WINDPIC. W for welfare approach, I for institutional approach, N for neoclassical approach, D for deductive, P for philosophical, right? Then on and on like that until you complete it for those who like using mnemonics. That's the end. The value of studying HET. It makes students understand how economic ideas evolved as influenced by circumstances surrounding each time period. Okay, so when we begin to go through this course and then you see what made people to propose the ideas that they were proposing, then you are going to understand that okay, so this was what happened, right? So it makes you understand how economic ideas evolved as influenced by the circumstances. So it just that they didn't bring ideas from thin air. It wasn't like that. So it was more or less like people were being um, affected, by what was happening around them, and that shaped their thoughts, right? So it's just more or less, I think human beings don't exist in a vacuum. So we are kind of subjective. So there's a kind of subjectivity that comes to us because our environment affects us, so like you understand how people brought about their economic ideas by their environments at whatever time period that they were talking from, right? So, and that would also help you to develop your own economic idea. So when you see what happened then, okay, so even if you were to develop an economic idea, you have to look at what is happening in your own time. So some of the ideas that they postulated solve the problems of their own period, right? And so that helps you in your own period to also think of things that will solve problem in your own period. Those ideas may become useless in 30 years to come, but how do you bring up ideas in your own period? So when you see how people in the past have done theirs, it kind of helps you to see how you're going to develop your own too. All right. Two, it helps students appreciate the significant contributions of economic thinkers, the richness of the field of economics. So when we begin to go through this course, you see how rich economics is. So you kind of see some debates that have happened in the past, the debunking and the appreciation of ideas, how some ideas have they were not debunked, they are so good, that the only thing that could happen to them was to furnish them, like kind of furnish them over time. So you kind of, when you go through this course, it helps you appreciate the significant contributions of different people, to the richness of the field of economics. Then again, it helps contemporary economists avoid the mistakes of the past, right? So when you see some of the mistakes that have been done in the past, then why should you repeat them? For example, during the mercantilist era, they believe in protectionism and bullionism, as I've said earlier, as a major avenue to building the wealth of a nation. But today it's not, right? So we'll be talking about the accumulation of coins and silver coins, gold coins, to be the main thing that gives your country wealth. I think the wealth of a nation should depend on the people of that country. I think even that is one of, it's among 10 principles of economics. Okay, talking about the how do we put it now? It's more like the prosperity of a nation depends on the productivity of its citizens, something like that. Not exactly that way, but something like that. So I think maybe the eighth principle or something like that. Maybe economic growth of a nation depends on the level of productivity of its citizens, right? So that is what really counts as wealth, today. So, and because you've got through a course like this, so if someone happens to be proposing the accumulation of coins in the future, you kind of take them to the past. This has happened before and it did not work. And when they were also pursuing when they were pursuing protectionism, they were trying to, they were not looking at comparative advantage. You are just trying to sell um, manufactured products to other people, and you are not importing manufactured product from any other person. So like people have done this thing before and it wasn't really used, it wasn't efficient, right? People have to trade in good things. Okay, there are manufactured products that your country cannot produce and should not produce. Even if you can produce, you should not produce it because it's incurring greater opportunity cost. So you are more or less wasting your resources producing those things. Let other people that can do it cheaper produce and pay a lower fee to get them than, so because it has happened in the past, you can avoid that mistake in the future. Now, the understanding of HET helps discover gaps in knowledge where contemporary economists can contribute to the advancement of the discipline. So when you read through and see, okay, for example, the labor theory of value I was saying, and you read through it, no, how can you just say supply is, how can you even say labor is the only cost of production? How about land? What can you say about land? What can you say about natural resources part of land? So what can you say about enterprise? What can you say about the person, the entrepreneur that is bringing all of these things together? Does it also incur a cost? Can you talk about implicit cost of production and so on and so forth like that? Now, next, it teaches readers how to think by countering absurd, irrelevant ideas that are not applicable in contemporary times. Okay, so when you read and you see some ideas that you'll just be wondering, how did they believe this thing in that era? For example, Aristotle supported slavery stating that some men were born to be subservient to others and should be glad carrying out their divine duty. So imagine today, right, in 2023, right, so hearing this, that some men were born to be slaves and they should be happy in carrying out their divine duties, because he supported households having slaves, in addition to the power, the labor power that the household already has, from looking at the number of people in the family. But today, if you enslave anybody, you are going to face the wrath of the law. Okay, so it teaches readers how to think by countering absurd irrelevance. This is not making any sense, right? All right, then it can help contemporary economists to be more objective in their formulation of economic principles and policies. For example, Karl Marx witnessed capitalist abuse of labor without seeing the massive potential of capitalism for what it was and could be. So what Karl Marx was just talking about, the abolishment of capitalism. He just wanted a revolt. He was looking at a revolt, a revolution that was going to happen when the proletariat class, get tired of their exploitation, then they fight back, against, they fight the capitalists who are very wealthy but are few in number because of the high inequality that exists in the country. So that was what he was really looking at. He was not seeing the aspect where capitalism engineered massive economic growth, because capitalism was more of the era where there was an industrial revolution, right, coupled with the presence of technology, and massive division of labor that was making workers to be very, very productive, okay, than they used to be. Economic growth is just increasing the output of a country over a period of time, right? So capitalism engineers a lot of economic growth. So you didn't really see that part. I didn't even see the aspect of welfare of citizens being great, because when you have capitalism, a lot of people come into the business, and there's a lot of competition, so a lot of goods are produced, and people would have many goods to choose from. You understand? So he wasn't looking at capitalism well. And if you look at many countries today, they are more of mixed economy. But if you look at the ratio of capitalism to the aspect of what the government is doing, you see that the capitalists have like a stronger hold on the economy than so the government is more like playing a supporting role today. So he was advocating for communism, that the economy will go from being capitalist to being socialist and then being communist, where nobody owned a single property, so where all the properties for everybody. All right, so that's more or less saying that there's nothing like property right. So he was over influenced by the sufferings of laborers that time, and he was just talking from that perspective, and he didn't really see capitalism for what it was. So today, from readers and students exposed to the history of economic thought, so when you've gone through the history and you've seen some of the things that happened, you should be able to avoid the influence that's you should be able to avoid emotional responses to things. So you should be more clear-headed, you understand, when you're trying to propose economic ideas and principles that might eventually become policies in a given country at a particular period of time. So I hope I've been able to explain these things within this little period that I have. I'm kind of running out of time already. All right, and I hope you've understood them. So if you have any questions, you ask them. You know where to ask your question. Leave them in the comment section, or ask me in class, right, on the respective WhatsApp groups, if that's what we are still operating by then. So the next is assignment. Number 1, explain at least 5 challenges that may be faced in a study of HET, in the teaching and learning of HET. Explain at least 5 challenges that may be faced. So you just find your way around that. Now the question 2 is really what I want us to look at, because this is like a typical exam question. It may not come in this way, but it's gonna revolve around something like this. So I will need you to submit your assignments on, you are going to do both anyway, but you may just not have to like spend time on answering the first question, so you can more or less like highlight. Okay, I said explain at least, right? The explanation should not be really much, maybe 2-3 lines, but number 2 is what I really want you to look at. So economics, academia and administrators are being pressurized by the corporate world to teach more contemporary vocational oriented economics courses instead of history. Now 2 of their arguments are dead men tell no tales, and absurd ideas ought not be revived. Dead men tell no tales, and absurd ideas ought not be revived. So discuss these arguments and argue for the continuation of the study of HET. Discuss it. So what does it mean that dead men tell no tales, right? What does it mean? So what was the argument in that line? And what was the argument in the aspect of absurd ideas ought not to be revived? So you discuss the argument. So what did they say? What did they not say? What have they been saying? What do you think? Whatever like that. Then discuss this argument, and you should argue for the continuation of the study of HET, right? So that's that. I wish you the very best. So I'm going to be seeing you guys in the next class. Thank you for coming. Bye.